Leaders, can I be frank with you? We're choosing leaders for organizations all wrong. Today I want to look at the 5 leadership theories. Then if you stick around, I will give you the 6th killer theory. This theory that supersedes all other theories in a way to build your organization. You see, because most leaders are out there looking for the best leadership strategy through which they can effectuate the change in their organizations, the change in their communities, the change in their businesses. But the best leaders, that's you and me, we're going to have become great leaders by empowering the best people. You see, we don't look for the best leadership strategies, we look to empower the best people. That's a dichotomy that we need to address, and we're going to address that today. So the 5 leadership theories. What is a theory? What is a leadership theory? These are the traits and the behaviors, these 2 things, traits and behaviors, that you have to have in order to become a leader. Now, for our purposes, since we're looking for the best people for our organizations, these are the traits and the behaviors that we're going to look for in people. Now, these 5 leadership theories start off with the first theory, which is the most antiquated theory, the theory that we reject from the outset, which is the great man theory. Now, notice I said great man theory, not great woman theory, not great person theory. I say great man theory because this is a very sexist theory. The theory is that leaders are born, not made. Leaders are born, not made, which we obviously reject. It says that males, typically tall males, are the ones that are most generative to great organizations, great leadership. Now, I want you to reject this. I want you to consciously think about this within your organizations as you interview people. Do not hire people because they're tall and good looking. The second leadership theory is what's called trait theory. Now, it's John Maxwell that says that we need to be attentive not to the person's position, but be more attentive to their disposition. This is when we select people that would come into the organization and become great leaders. And so this trait theory takes the great man theory and it is additive to the area of characteristics. They look for characteristics of a tall, good-looking, masculine type of figure, but also add in the requirement that they be intellectually competent, that there be some sort of intelligence there. Now, what this tells us is it tells us that we're looking for people that are visually look like leaders, but also can think and have high intellect. Now, where does this get us? It gets us to the place where we could potentially hire very, very weak leaders, people without a backbone, people without integrity, people that are not able to take the sufficient risk because maybe they've been handed leadership roles all of their lives. And you'll see this among a lot of very, very tall people. I think you probably see the same thing as well, where they consider themselves to be great leaders because they were always selected to be leaders because of the nature of their stature. And so it's not earned leadership, it is granted leadership through this great man or the second great theory of traits. Thirdly, we have this leadership theory that is called contingency theory, and that there's this balance that leaders must take when they approach a leadership situation. So this is that the leaders must have the right behavior. They must have the right behavior. They must have in mind the needs of the people. Now, I like this because it's responsive to your people. It's keeping the people in place, keeping the people in mind, but being able to articulate and navigate these 2 areas. So you have the behavior, the needs, but then also you have the context of the situation, that what kind of project is this? And what kind of task is at hand? Is this a turnaround task to save the organization? Or is this a turnaround task to be able to pivot to become a different type of organization? These are 2 different types of task types that require 2 different types of leadership. A turnaround requires a strong leader who's able to make very, very quick, very, very simple steps and be able to have those steps cascade down throughout the organization. And so this contingency theory takes into account the balance. It's the equivalent balance of behavior, needs, and context of the situation, context of the task. Now, the 4th leadership theory is called situational theory. You might say, Rick, this sounds a lot like contingency theory. Contingency theory, situational theory. It is very, very similar, only that this takes the chance of the context and brings it to the next level. In that the leader in this situation overemphasizes the follower's needs over their own style or their own historical success track for different types of leadership strategies. And so this is something like we think about what our followers need first and foremost, and then we adapt our characteristics, we adapt our need, we adapt our leadership style, and we bring in additional knowledge resources, additional skill sets to be able to coach us as leaders through the navigation of the organization. And this is where it's really, really important to think about building leaders within your organizations. How do you get leaders within your organization to be able to conceptualize what their people need? This is the great need that you have and I have with my organizations. How do we propagate leadership and care throughout the hierarchy of the organization? Now, if you watch some other videos, you'll know that I am a very, very big proponent for something called a disaggregation theory. Maybe you would call this a matrix organization, that there's not a hierarchy, but there's a matrix that you disaggregate into various types and different modes and nodes of organization for leadership to maximize its full potential. But in this case, the situational theory is one in which the needs of the people in the organization take precedence over the behavior or the historical behavioral success of the leader and the context for the situation. And so the fifth leadership theory, now keep in mind, if you stick around to the end, I'll give you a sixth bonus leadership theory that I just invented today, called attractive theory. So the fifth theory is behavioral theory. This behavioral theory is something like this, that leaders are behavioral driven, but they must focus on three skills. These three skills are intellectual, emotional, kind of the human side of skills, and also sort of this conceptualization of skills. So how does this impact our organization? What would this look like? They're thinking through the model of what it would look like 3 months, 12 months, 3 years down the line. And so you have the intellectual skill set, this technical skill set, how to do the job, how to be a leader, how to manage people, what systems to use. You have the human spectrum, which is really the EQ, the emotional quotient. And then you have this idea about sort of conceptualizing where the organization needs to be, what it would look like. This is the vision aspect of leadership. And so behavioral theory would say this, that leadership is a combination of intellectual quotient, emotional quotient, and synthesization of where the organization is and where it needs to be. And you run, like Einstein ran the thought experiments. You run the thought experiences on paper in your mind, and then you go out and execute on these, and you get these to propagate down into the organization. Now, I told you that I would give you a sixth bonus leadership theory, and this is it. This is what I like to call attractive theory. Attractive theory is something like this, that authenticity in a leader will attract accretive talent. Let me repeat that for you. Attractive theory says that the authenticity of a leader will attract accretive talent, that the talent will accrue not only in numbers but also in quality the more the leader is authentic. And the more the leader is authentic, the more the people in the organization will understand and know that they also can be authentic in the way that they lead, who they are, and what they think. And they have an honesty is the best policy type of perspective. So authenticity of the leader attracts accretive talent. And this is really how you build great organizations, not over a few months or a couple of years, but over decades. We have to accrue attractive, authentic talent to our organizations. And so these 5 leadership theories plus the bonus theory are things that I want you to think about as you develop leaders within your organization, because whenever the leader gets better, everyone gets better, as Craig Rochelle says. And we also must understand that it's not the title, it's not the position of the people in an organization, it's the disposition of them that accrues benefit and value and talent and great culture. Again, culture eats strategy for breakfast. We understand this. How do we propagate these leadership traits? Comment below. I'd love to hear from you on how you plan to do it within your organization.